Welcome to episode 4 of season 3 of Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. This episode, we welcome musician John Condron. Enjoy the show. So our guest today is a longtime friend of mine. He began his music career at the age of 9, singing with the Philadelphia Boys Choir. He's a singer-songwriter, as far as I'm concerned, in the purest form of the term. He's been performing since the day I met him, and long before that. He's performed as a solo act and a member of multiple bands. Most recently, he's part of a band called Crooked Tales. He also performs regularly with John Condron and the Old Gang Orchestra. He's on stage. I wrote down you're on stage weekly, but at this point, it sounds like you're on stage daily, all over the world.
Lately.
Performs a lot in the Joliet area, but all throughout Chicagoland. He produces other recording artists as well. He's been doing quite a bit of that and in talking just before the show, it sounds like, as I said, he is back on the local road playing venues all over the Will County, Joliet, Chicago area. He's also a husband. He's a father. He's a great friend of mine. I'm very happy to introduce John Condron. Welcome to our show, John.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. We were going to do it before, and I am perpetually technically challenged, so these things continue to pop up. But I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, you were definitely one of the first people we thought about when we talked about having guests on the show and whether we could even pull that off. And as with one of my earlier guests, one of the reasons was because you're a really nice guy, and I thought you'd say yes.
Awesome.
But you also, I believe, have an interesting, very interesting musical resume. I know you were born and raised in Philadelphia.
I was.
And I also know that's where you started your musical career. Can you give us a little synopsis of how you started on your road?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was real little. I was given one when I was 5, and I had an extreme interest in it, at least holding it or looking at it. I don't know. I think that's the way it starts, probably, for the most part.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of I always gravitated towards it. And I think, just seeing clips of The Who and stuff at a young age was very, very, had a huge impact on me. And I don't know if I don't know if I understood it, but I thought it was really, really exciting. And I wanted to do something like that. And then, as you mentioned, I wound up singing with the Philadelphia Boys Choir and Men's Chorale, which I think at the time when my mother and father found that, they found it because I guess they thought I could sing, and I wouldn't join the choir at school, probably because it was all girls at the time, and I was 8 or something, and they were like, "Well, would you sing if it was all boys?" Which is a strange thing, but when you're 8 years old, you're like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And so we went down having no idea the level of what this organization was. I didn't know anything about it, and I wound up getting in there. I spent 2 years there in their prep program. It's like they have it's like a military thing, you go in there and you don't even get to walk into the room that the actual choir is in for a long time.
Oh, is that
So
right?
well, they teach you some basic theory stuff, and they teach you how to sight read, and they teach you how to breathe and how to stand and how to, all those kind of things that are just incredible lessons for a future performer, or like if it goes that way. And then I wound up actually in the choir after all those different tests and levels and such, and it was an amazing experience because by the time my voice changed, then they kind of unceremoniously threw me out, which they must do. I had been able to, I'd gone around the world. We sang in the summertime. We used to go. I went to France and Monaco, Italy, Greece, Yugoslavia.
Wow.
We performed for Prince Rainier in Monaco. We were at the Vatican in a private performance thing with the Pope.
Wow.
Time we went to I was on stage, kind of backing up or singing in the background with so it was Riccardo Muti and the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra at the Academy of Music, and Pavarotti. Luciano Pavarotti was singing. The experience was just outrageous, especially for like somebody from my neighborhood in Philly, like, you know, with our background and everything, it wasn't like we were going to ballets and operas and that sort of thing all the time. So it was really eye-opening, and it was I fell madly in love with it. You know, just the idea of performing and traveling, and you know, the romantic notions of traveling to go perform places, and I still have that. I have that to this day.
Well,
You know,
yeah.
and that's not really necessarily the reality of it, but I still have the delusional romanticism about it. So it kind of keeps you going a little bit sometimes, you know.
Well,
Uh,
how long did you then perform as part of the choir before they kicked you
uh,
out?
but by the time it was all said and done, I would say the total amount of years from the beginning through they call it like a cadets program, or from that until the time that my voice changed. What are you talking? Maybe 4 years, maybe
Yeah.
tops. And then your
And
voice changes like everybody's does, and you don't they don't have any need for you. I mean, there's nothing they can do. I did go back when I turned 19. I had a little unsuccessful run at college, and I came home, and I went down to see them, and they asked me to sing, and I sang for them, and I wound up for a brief time for another year or two in their men's section, and I got to do a 3-week tour of Australia with them at that point in time. I was a little bit older, and really neat things, like stuff you could never do on your own. Like we sold out the Sydney Opera House.
wow.
There's like standing
Holy shit.
ovation at the Sydney Opera House. You're taking like 11 flights within the 3 weeks inside that massive country, and the places that organization is playing, you know, unbeknownst to me at the time, wound up being very different places than I was able to play by myself. I just thought it was always going to be
You're
like
just
that. You know,
very high expectations after that, right?
this is easy. Let me just show up and play the Sydney Opera House, you know?
So what was the next step after, you know, and I'm assuming also before this return, the short return to the choir, my guess is from, and what I understand from, you know, knowing you, is that you were already on the road to rock and roll at that
Failure.
time.
No,
What?
the road to ruin. No, I never stopped playing. I guess there was periods of time where I did other things. You know, I ran track very passionately. Is the only reason I got into college, actually. And then, you know, when that didn't work out, I had always been playing. I never stopped playing the guitar, and I think I started writing songs when I was very young. They weren't good ones, as I don't think most people's first ones are. I was always kind of writing songs, and I think I always, even when I went to college for music. I didn't go, you know, to be an accountant or anything like that. You know, I
Mhm.
went for music anyway, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I left, because I think in my youth, I thought, why is this necessary?
Yeah, you could.
I'm just
I'm
going
going
to
to
be
be playing
I'm just going to be a
this.
famous rock star anyway. Why do I need to waste 4 years of my life sitting here learning about music? I already know everything about music, which of course is just, you know, blissful youthful ignorance. Yeah, I started a band with some high school friends of mine, just after high school, just, you know, just that same year, called well, we wound up calling it JC Taxi, which was a joke because I was the only one that didn't drive in the band, and so they had to pick me up all the time, and so there was this kind of, like, they were like a taxi service of mine for shows and such. So, and then we played all over. This is kind of co-happening with the choir thing at the, you know, at that same time. So we wound up playing all over affiliates, and we would go down to Delaware, play bottle caps, and just different, you know, regionally.
Right.
The East Coast is great for playing music, at least in the capacity that everything is very travelable. Does that make sense? Like, everything is
Yeah.
close. You can be in Boston or New York or in Jersey, Philly, Baltimore, Delaware, like Wilmington, Delaware, all within like 5 hours total. You can hit all of those places if that's what you want to do.
It sounds like you traveled not just the East Coast though with that band. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of how you ended up where you're sitting right now.
No, actually, that's a different band altogether. So
Oh,
during the
okay.
during the JC Taxi years or whatever, you know, certain shows, we met a band called Poets and Slaves from
That's the
New York City.
name.
Actually, they were from Jersey, but they were signed to a label out of New York City, and we became friends, and we did a bunch of shows together, and they liked our music and we liked their music, and I think we were kind of in awe of them because they had a record deal, which, you know, is what at the time in
Yep.
the early 90s, that was, I mean, if you got it, again, delusions of youth, but if you got a record deal, I mean, you were the Stones. There was nothing left. You were going to be
Step
back at the
one.
Sydney Opera House playing your songs. And then over the years, some things changed with their lineup, and I wound up a rhythm guitar player and like backing vocalist in Poets and Slaves, and we did some shows that were really cool, and that's the band that I moved out to Illinois with.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Because I don't think I saw you play as part of Poets and Slaves.
No, I wouldn't have thought that entity didn't last very long in Illinois. We came out, there was a record out already, but we had one like kind of in the can or whatever. And we came out here, and the reason that we moved out here, or at least the official reason anyway, there was a number of different circumstances, but we were doing well, or there was a song that they had done probably before I was even on, like a record prior, was doing well in the Midwest, better in the Midwest, better regionally out here than where we were. And so rather than, dump a bunch of money into continually driving out here, we thought it would be a good idea if we were temporarily maybe located, had a base in Chicago.
Right.
And when we got out here to Chicago, we knew nothing about Chicago. So we were walking around a loop looking for apartments, and we didn't, I mean, that wasn't going to happen. We didn't have any money.
Right.
And one of the front man for that band, actually, Martin, he was at the time, he was engaged to a girl that was originally from like Minooka, Joliet kind of area, who had been living out in Jersey with him. And they so we came to Joliet, kind of like slightly deflated and defeated after not being able to find a cheap apartment in the one part of the loop that we were looking in. And we, it just happenstance, we got up one day and we walked downtown because for me, I was like, well, is there downtown areas or a place we can go? And they're like, sure. And we came down, and it was kind of at that time, this is 97. There wasn't, Joliet was very much a ghost town, especially during the day when you were downtown. It was, you remember, it was lawyers, there was people around, but there wasn't like a whole lot like there is now. Like there wasn't a whole lot of options as far as food or getting a beer, or we were walking down Chicago Street looking at the architecture and the Rialto Theater, and the one place that's open is a place called Chicago Street Bar and Grill. And so we went inside, and they were really nice to us. Our waiter wound up being Matt Goins, and so he kind of like was waiting on us, and he just kind of said, like, who are you guys and why are you here? You all sound fun to me, and there's 6 of you sitting around a table, and you just don't look like you belong on Chicago Street at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. So, and we told him the whole story, and I don't know who asked him. They said, do you know of any places around here? Because if the idea is we're only going to be here for 6 months, then it doesn't really matter if we live in Chicago or here or anywhere else. And so he went and got his mom, who was Mary Woods, and she came over, and she was just fantastic out of the gates. Like she was like tough South Side Chicago lady, and she took us upstairs, and there was an abandoned craft store on the 2nd floor, and there was an abandoned upstairs floor on the 3rd floor, and she offered to rent them both to us insanely cheap and reasonable because there was nobody up there. And that's pretty much all it was. 1 month later, we pulled up outside of Chicago Street and started loading our bags up into the 2nd floor there. And then that, obviously that didn't, that entity or that phase of it didn't really work out, because one by one, tours and trips we had planned, and the record got shelved, and we didn't get to go to our tour of Thailand or wherever we were supposed to go. I don't remember. And we played a show down Chicago Street. I don't think we were the first band to play there, but there was not regular music happening there. I think I'm pretty sure that if you went back, there was blues bands that had popped in there and played over from time to time. But we played down there. We set up we just asked her because we didn't have anything to do. We wound up, kind of like semi-stranded on the 2nd floor of this place. And, with no money and no shows and no income. Nobody had jobs. Very, very well planned out move. And so we did a show down there, and it went really, really well. And all the people that we had just recently met in the last month, all came out, and everybody's young too. At the time, I think I was 24 when I moved out here, about to be 25. So it was the summer of 97, and so was everyone else. So were all you guys, all the lawyers and all the,
Yep.
like everybody that I met that I'm still friends with now, relatively the same age. There wasn't kids yet. There wasn't And it was just like the right time, right place, because we wound up doing that a couple times, and it really went over well. And then, one by one, everybody in the band said, "Hey, listen, I have 3 credits left to finish my degree in architecture or whatever. So I'm gonna
Right.
go home. This is not. I didn't come out here to just play in a bar every week. If
Right.
none of this other stuff is happening, I got a plan B. And everybody one by one did that. And then Marty and I did a couple shows over the next, I would say, year, where it's just him and I. We would go out to Milwaukee and that sort of thing. And then, he went home too, and I stayed. At the time, I started working at the Chicago Street for Mary. I was bartending, but I think I stayed probably because I didn't want to go home having like failed at what I it's more of like an ego thing for me, I think, at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And it worked out, it worked out great. But
Well, and is that when you started performing primarily as a solo artist at Chicago Street anyway? It seems to
yeah,
me that that's the time
yeah,
frame.
yeah, absolutely. So you're talking like by now it's, let's say it's 99
Yeah.
or something like that, relatively speaking. And yeah, I did. And then I went back to Martin had got an apartment in Brooklyn in one of these like illegal lofts that you read about on the invisible, like, 18th
Right.
floor of some kind of factory building. And he set up a studio there. And so I went back to New York, actually with the help of some people from Chicago Street. We talked to make a record. A bunch of people that kind of like all kicked in, and I was like, oh, I have a budget for a record and a plane ticket home. So I went and saw my mom and dad, and I went to New York, and we made my first solo record, which was My Own Device.
And that's what you started playing. I think I met you playing songs
Sure.
from that album, which I fell in love with.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you.
Um, in my introduction, I said you've played with a number of bands. You've been frontman, you've been sideman, you've been co-frontman, I guess, in some cases. But I will always
Stalker.
I I will always stand by. I love when you get up there by yourself with a guitar. Your
Oh,
solo
thanks,
work
man.
is really my favorite. But you really this is I looking back, maybe I'm editorializing a little bit, but it seems to me that you kind of became the core of a Joliet music scene. If not the core, you were always there, it seems like. And a number of other bands, I became aware of a number of other bands right around that time and just after that also started playing at Chicago Street and other locations around here. But it seemed to grow and grow to the point where this is one of the stronger local music scenes I think you can have in a town the size of Joliet as compared to, playing
I
in.
put it I put it up against much larger places, to be honest with you. At least as far as the variety, the community aspect of it, like the supportive nature of the other bands and the other,
Yeah, talk a little about that. How do you guys work together?
well, I think, there were bands and there were musicians here long before I got here. I think the right timing, right time, right place thing that we mentioned before is really falls into it, because everybody that I met, and myself included, we were at the right age. We were willing to do it. There really wasn't an original music thing happening.
Right, right.
There was music, certainly there was great music, but there wasn't like an original. So who is this guy? What are these songs? Why am I listening to this? Kind of a thing. But they did. And then you realize all of these other bands in the area, or musicians in the area, that have been traveling to Indianapolis, been traveling to Milwaukee, been traveling to Chicago for all of their shows because they're playing original music. All of a sudden, they get wind of the fact that they might let me play my stuff here if I go down there, or if I meet some of these
Right.
people. And Mary was a big part of it, because she let it happen.
I was going to say that it for at least a while, and maybe even, and I think still now, your Chicago Street pub, what used to be Chicago Street Bar and Grill, seems to be a real central part of that scene.
The genesis of it, for me, at least, anyway.
Right, right. And a lot of the bands that were kind of your generation, and of course they've all gone through different iterations, and it's funny to watch from the outside to see, people play in one band and then kind of split off there, but form together with other ones. It's like an amoeba of local music.
Yeah, it's the side effect to what we're saying, is that the support. when those bands started to come down, and it was genreless too. There was country bands, there was blues bands, there was heavy rock bands, there were singer songwriters, there was kind of New Orleans influence, kind of like not quite what it's become now with the big land yacht, but there was a little bit of that in it too, and bluegrass bands, and everybody. It didn't matter because I would show up to the bluegrass band show, and the bluegrass band would show up to the heavy band show, and the heavy band
Right.
guys would show up because it was just, I think we felt like there wasn't, we were wrong, but I think we felt like there wasn't many of us. And so we would make the time to go support each other and get to know each other. And so we wound up with these crazy bills and these crazy shows that probably wouldn't make sense to most people as far as musical genres go, but it worked. And it wound up being that for the most part, everybody that liked what I was doing also liked, what these other bands were doing and vice versa. And it just kind of grew from there.
Do you feel like you're the senior guy in the scene at this point?
I
You're
don't,
still younger than me, but you've been doing this a long time.
I have the grayest beard. I can tell you that much.
And it's giant, by the way. I've never seen such a beard on you in my life.
I'm not seeing such a man. No, no, I think that there are people that, someone like Brent James, I would have met Brent around about that same time, and even before Stone City Stragglers, who I'm sure we're going to get into.
Yes, we are.
He had the Brent James band, which was more of a straight country band. And we met at the pub while I was bartending, while Mary owned the place. The same thing. He came down, we talked music. I told him that, we were playing here and blah, blah, blah. And someone like Matt Biskey would have been around at the same time back then. And the Shiv. And there was a bunch of bands around. I think that probably from that particular era, maybe Brent and I are the two that are still like around and most active, at least anyway, as far as having putting out records and still doing shows and Sunday morning podcasts and that sort of thing. So.
What do you see your role now in terms of the younger bands that are playing in the area? Because I know there are some, and unfortunately I'm not as familiar with them, but
I carry their drums in.
Excellent. In fact, it sounds like you may be doing a little bit of that today, later on today, right? You got a gig.
Yeah, it's gonna be a nice one today, but no heavy equipment today, no heavy lifting for me anymore, Tom.
That's excellent.
I think the thing is, it's funny because you talk about there are many people that are still very active just after I met Brent, and like, and there's still people, you got people that have been around forever, people like T-Bird Huck, and those guys were there long before I was there, so they're still around. Just when you're talking about the blues, a lot of times the blues tends to be its own community and its own thing. And
right.
So you go to see the blues, and people that go to see the blues, they love the blues, and it's not that they don't like other music, but it tends not to interact bill wise. Like, you don't want to go see me play a blues in the middle of a blues set. Whereas some of the other stuff, you got a bluegrass band and a rock band and then a singer songwriter. It's kind of sellable. There's kind of a way to put those three things together. So, but just prior to or just after meeting Brent, like I mentioned Matt Biskey, and then because of the Stragglers, you're talking about Phil Lazzari, and you meet Ali Maroney and Brett Figuera. And it's funny because now that I've gotten to know all these people musically, I'm in bands with some of them, or have been in bands with some of them. It turns out there was a whole other thing going on in the early 2000s that we didn't know about in the Tinley area, Orland, Tinley. And I wasn't there for that scene, but there was bands like Galhead and Milk Plow, and there's so many of them. People like Don Nudie and Tom Maslowski and Phil Lazzari and Ali Flood, and they were doing original music at that time, like at least in the early 2000s or whatever, in the Tinley Orland area. We hadn't come together yet. We hadn't
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that makes me optimistic, is that music seems to always exist somewhere. Someone has decided, whether they think they're going to be a rock star and playing in Australia, or they just want to play with their buddies. It seems like it doesn't matter where you are. I know where Chris lives now in North Carolina is another one of those. North Carolina is renowned for having kind of a local music scene, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, because we decided that that's going to be the theme of this episode of the podcast. Is just how the local music scene works and maybe recommending some bands and some songs that people wouldn't know about because they
Sure.
aren't, top 40. They're not on necessarily. It's easier to get on the radio now, but there's so many damn stations that, it's harder to find, I think.
It's easier to get on the internet now.
It's easy to
It's
get on
true.
the internet. Yeah.
It's harder to get on the radio.
Actually, I suppose that's true. And if there's any
You
proof,
used to
it's
play
easy
me on the radio.
Yeah, that's right. I can remember that. I can remember hearing you on XRT for that matter.
Yeah, I couldn't deliver the mail there now. There's nothing you can't get in. I couldn't get anywhere near an actual radio station now. But like you said, it doesn't necessarily matter as much either, because if you're playing just to play it, there are a million outlets for that. There are streaming. You can stream it anywhere. It's the best of times and the worst of times.
Well, Chris and I are definitely proof that anybody can get on the internet as far as work goes. They let us in. I think they tried to stop us, but they had to let us in for some reason.
So John, mostly going to focus on the local music scene, but I'm curious, who are some of the coolest people that you've had the opportunity to play with? It doesn't have to be local. They don't have to be famous. It's just, we had a couple episodes ago where we talked about artists that we hate to love. And Tom told a great story about,
was that Ed Hamill on trial.
Hamill on trial. Like, what an asshole he apparently was.
I don't remember.
That's the way I should have handled that story, frankly. But
your listenership just went down one. He's listening somewhere.
So it's just more. Who are some of the cooler people we've had? Pavarotti, of course, when you're younger. But and
I wouldn't even say I met him. I was in the room,
right.
with 85 other people singing. It wasn't like that. Not to keep harping on it, but I would put the songwriters that I know now that I actually know now, I would put them up against anybody that I've ever met. I think Kenny Wayne Shepherd was really cool. I got to open for him back when I had a band called it was The Benefit. Just like the kind of 10 years before the Old Gang Orchestra, which is present, with Barrett Harvey and Doc Bella and then Jeff Julian at the end there too. Geez, Billy Aldridge played in that for a little while too. So again, there's that mismatching or mishmashing, right? But Kenny Wayne Shepherd was really cool. We opened for him at the Rialto, which was really neat. And he was a really, really nice guy. I went out back with him. I was having a cigarette and he was standing out back. He had bought a Trans Am somewhere along the way on tour. It was sitting out back and he was just looking at it, walking around, looking at it. And he was really, really nice. It was slow kind of Southern accent. And he was, younger than me. He's a young guy, but he didn't drink or anything. He was sober already at that time. I mean, I don't know how old he could have been. He's probably 21, 22. I don't know. He was young, but so he kind of didn't do any of those things that you would never be doing in a green room or hanging out or sitting there. So he was just outside looking at his Trans Am that he bought. And he talked to me. He would have talked to anybody, and he was brilliant too when he got on stage. He was great. I used to do a Jeff Buckley tribute up at Uncommon Ground every year. The one they do every year. And one year that I was on it, Duncan Sheik was there. Do you remember Duncan Sheik? I only knew one of his songs at the time. I was really impressed with him, and he was really friendly as well. And then to actually hear him play not that song but other songs was great. So that was pretty cool. We played at Naperville Rib Fest with Adrian Ballou one time, and he was also very cool. To see that was cool. So there's been people along the way. I don't. None of them would even remember that we were there, I'm sure. But it was really cool to meet people that were on a level you'd like to be at, that were also kind and courteous and good at their craft and seemed to take care of the band and the people around them too. So
you're good. You got to the name that I was hoping you would get to, because I chose for my local scene where I grew up, which is Cincinnati, North Carolina. I've been here. I listen to hell out of music. I just haven't gone to a lot of shows in North Carolina, and it seemed like a little cherry picking because it's such a fertile music scene. Not that Cincinnati isn't, but so another question I had: such amazing experiences you had, like playing before a sold out Sydney Opera House. What role does the audience play? Because I went to a show a couple months ago where there had to be fewer than 10 total people, and the artist I went to go see still just crushed it. I mean, and I just sat there and I'm like, how do you put that much energy in when there's no one here listening to you? I'm not saying maybe you never had no one listening to you, but what's the difference? You
Oh,
know,
I've been to a show or two.
10 people's that's about my average show these days.
And just to interrupt you before you answer, John, Chris, you've never seen anyone. John puts more entertainment energy into every show. It doesn't matter. He's going to play in front of the Joliet Library near my house in like a week, and he puts just as much energy into that as I've seen him when he played at the Rialto. I swear to God.
Now, to answer your question, Chris, I think that it depends on, because the same thing that allows you to play for 10 people, like you're playing for 4,000, 5,000 people, I think is the same thing that makes you able to play for 4,000 people instead of 10, because there are some people that would prefer the 10. Not that the crowd, I love the crowd, and I personally, the bigger the better, and the more interactive the better for me. But I think that you could be put off walking out on stage and being shocked by the amount of people that are there as well. So I think if the idea is, and maybe it's just every performer's different or whatever, but I think the idea is like the way that I'm feeling about it, regardless. Just however I'm feeling about it. Some shows are more frantic than others, I think, for me. But if I'm going to expect people to listen to something that I wrote, then I better be able to believe in it or enjoy it, or what's it's kind of fraudulent otherwise, maybe.
That's cool. That's a good way to put it.
Yep, great answer.
Well, let's move on.
We used to go down, real quick. We used to go down and play. There was a couple of years in a row. I went down and played the Eno Fest. Have you ever go down to Eno Fest?
I have not.
It's in Durham.
I know. I'm sorry. I thought it was on Tom. No, I've heard of it. I've not gone.
Yeah, you should. It's nice. It's a nice.
Yeah, State Park is a really cool area.
Yeah, we did a show down there. Mickey Hart was in town, and we were kind of touring around from Ireland. He was in town, and we wound up with some friends and some mutual booking agents, and Eric from Flipside. Flipside Works, the record label that we had for a while. He booked us down there, and it was the stories that place. Talk about amazing people in that part of the world. They're just the coolest people, and I still got some really good friends to this day from those couple years going down there. And the one time I was with Mickey and we played, I was playing with Mickey for his set, and then they gave me kind of like sympathy sets, like the role, if you're coming down, you can play your own songs as well too. So I would play like, so I was doubling up the sets over the 3 days. It was a 3-day festival, and we played 14 times over the 3 days.
Wow.
And it was like 104 degrees.
Yes.
It was over July 4th weekend, and they had misters and tents backstage. The hospitality tent for all the bands, they served us like, it was like gallons of water and fruit, and like I had never been to a backstage area where everything was so nutritious and healthy, and I realized very quickly on there was a reason for that. They were trying not to have anybody die like backstage, They were calling one stage we played on. I played at 1 o'clock, noon or 1 o'clock, and it was just in this open field, like facing the sun. It was just like we were calling it the surface of the sun stage, and you're just standing there, and like there are actually thousands and thousands of people there, but they're all so far back because they're in the tree line, because you can't sit in the field, so you feel like you're playing one of those feelings. You feel like you're playing to like no one, and then there's this like distant echo of applause, like tree line. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you off, but you kept talking about.
No, you're good.
I have great memories of being down there.
I think Tom was going to move us to our playlist picks.
Yeah, that's it. I'm glad you interrupted though, because that's a
great story.
Yeah. So when you and I communicated before the episode, John, and in fact, you kind of prompted us to focus on the idea of local bands, local music. And Chris and I historically love to make a playlist. And so we've both come up with some recommendations that most of which will end up on our playlist, which ends up on Spotify and Apple Music and all that stuff. But we also like to hear from our guest, and we would like to throw a couple of songs. If you've got something you'd like to recommend, and you've played locally in all kinds of locations, so I don't want to limit you to anywhere, but if you've got something you want to recommend.
Well, that's the thing about local music, is it's everywhere. It's universal. Wherever you're at, that's the local music. So it doesn't really have to focus on anywhere. And it's also not only is it universal. I had someone come up to me about a month ago, and like very kindly, and they said, and somebody that comes to see me pretty regularly, and they said, we don't really like original music, but we've gotten to know yours, and so we enjoyed it, and we come to all your shows, and you know, really nice. And I very kindly, I was like, all the music that you listen to is original music, all of it. You know what I mean? Like at some point in time, you know, well, you know what I mean. I said, actually, I mean, the reason that you what you said to me is you've gotten to know a couple of my songs, so now you like the set. I said, imagine if you did that with a bunch of bands around here, you'd feel the same way. I mean, the first people that were out seeing Springsteen, he was an original band, and somebody said the same thing, hey, play the Beatles or whatever, you know, whatever they were doing, and you have no idea when you're seeing it or when you what that may become for you or for a larger, you know, community in general. You may be seeing your next favorite band or hearing your next favorite song. You may also be seeing somebody that may wind up, you know, much larger, and you saw them win. Or it just may be somebody that stays local forever, you know, and nothing like that ever happens for them. But it's just as good. I don't think there's levels of, there might be levels of performance or levels of action that what you can do as success kind of follows. But I don't know that at the inception, at the actual song, if someone has written a brilliant song, there's no better, you know, there's nothing better anywhere else. You know, it's just depends on what happens with it or how many people are exposed to it.
I agree
You know,
completely.
with the exception to, like, you know, I'm not saying that there's a bunch of Bob Dylans walking around or that kind of thing. You know, I'm just saying, you know, there obviously are worldly standouts in poetry and art and songwriting and stuff. But I mean, as far as, you know, for the most part, I've heard some of the most brilliant songs I've ever heard just in little places where I had access to the person that wrote them and was playing them. And I think it's an amazing thing that more people should venture out and try to take part in.
Yeah, and I think the internet is, you know, as evil as it can be, that's one of the great things about the internet, right? Is finding, you know, there are all kinds of sites now, not only the artist's own sites, but other sites where you can listen to, like SoundCloud, for example,
Yeah.
where you can listen to what we would, you know, probably define as local music, only because it's not nationally or internationally known. And
Sure.
it's hard to find, and that's one of the reasons we like to do these lists. Chris and I in particular like to point out stuff that maybe other people haven't, you know,
Right.
heard of. So what do you got do you have a couple, 2, 3, 4? I'm not sure how much you were able to prepare.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where I, you know, you have a couple, and as we're talking right now, more pop into your head, and you're, you know, you just kind of start, it goes on forever, you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
think you just, well, you just keep, you just, as the conversation about, like, you asked me a question earlier that I kind of talked about carrying drums in for the younger bands, but you know, a band like River Horse had such an impact on me because I met them, and I just was blown away by them, and then we, you know, we became really good friends, and now I'm in a band called Crooked Tales with Brian, who was the lead singer and songwriter for River Horse, and that band, you know, I thought they were mind-blowing band, you know, and really kind of a unique, and, you know, it's just a great band. So I mean, I think as far as the list go, I mean, I got a couple like jotted down or whatever, just thinking off the top of my head, and I think I was trying to maybe go older, kind of like you are, a little bit of new or whatever. But, you know, I would listen to absolutely anything that River Horse ever put out.
Pick one of their songs because Tom
Right.
put some of their stuff on playlists.
Oh, that's great. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well,
And
these
I forget
things.
which one it is, but one of their songs is just shocking that it's not more popular.
Yeah, you know, Brian always had this way, and the band too, like just the way that, you know, as a trio, they used to, I would be mesmerized seeing them live, and it's haunting nursery rhymish kind of like ethereal rock, you know, and it gets loud, but then it gets soft, and it's almost like you can hear like music boxes in the background. It's just really mesmerizing, a lot of it, you know.
Yeah, it always feels very original, and even live they had that ability to do that. And those guys are young, right? Brian's significantly younger than you and I are, correct? Or is he?
Well, I mean, I'm younger than you. Let's get that.
Oh, fair enough. Fair
No.
enough.
Not really. No, yeah, Brian. No, Brian. No, they are. They are. And, you know, I think it doesn't seem like that to me at all now in
Right.
Crooked Tales. And, you know, but I mean, Brian's probably 20 years younger than me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I figure he's
So
in his 30s,
yeah,
late 30s, maybe.
he's 30. But when we met him, he was, I think they were, they were 20, 21. So even more so.
So River Horse, we're putting on. We're going to make sure we have some links or mentions of them on the website. Who else do you think of when you think of great local music?
Well, I think if we're gonna go like kind of current, a band that's still operational and they're doing things, I would talk about Vaudevillains. The great Jeff Julian and Billy Aldridge and all of them. They're fantastic. There's a song of theirs. They have a brand new record out called Lights Out, but there's a song of theirs off of their Magician record that I love very much, and it's called Sea Anemone, like as in a sea anemone.
Like
I just think because
like Finding
they're
Nemo, right?
well, Vaudevillains is such a hard name to spell that they just decided all of their songs should be that way. No, it's brilliant. And I know that you're going to get probably, well, I don't know, but I know that you're going to get to the Stone City Stragglers, I'm sure, which is such a influential before their time kind of alt country band in this area, alt rock country band, who was responsible for me ever listening to anything in that genre, because I was so impressed by them that I went back and I found, Sunbolt, and I found Uncle Tupelo, and then I found Wilco, and the old 97s, that kind of stuff, probably because of, and people like yourself too, Tom,
I
because
was going to say, despite my efforts to do
yeah,
that, I think
you were into that music, that kind of music. I just had never been exposed to it, and someone said the word country, and I went, before
right.
I ever listened to it, which I've learned to, I've changed my mind completely about all of that now, but yeah, the Stone City Stragglers are great, and but I'll let you do them because you're gonna do that.
You're absolutely right.
So, but what I will do is I'll throw Allison Flood into that mix there. She has a record called Blackbird, and there's a song on that record called Harbor, and it's a solo Allison Flood song. So we'll get the double dip on the Stragglers a little bit. Well, not, I
Absolutely.
mean, at least in their circles. And the other band I wanted to talk about was the Regressors. I think
Yes.
Regressors were great, and many of the members of the Regressors are in the Big Land Yacht now, which is like a big first line, not first line,
Yeah, a lot
like
of
kind of
fun.
New Orleans style big band. And there's people from the Stragglers that play in Colonel Chloroform, and Don Nudie, who is the drummer in the Old Gang Orchestra, is also the drummer in Crooked Tales. And Tom Maslowski plays with, it's just it's never ending, So Chris Foray, who's in the Big Land Yap, who I just mentioned, also is the bass player in Crooked Tales. So in this area, it's hard to get away from having some kind of a fingerprint on you from them, or on them from you, as far as what is happening in the music scene, because we just don't seem to go away. And like nobody in the scene seems to ever just kind of retire. they just they,
Right.
they just keep playing. But I would throw These Times from the Regressors onto that list as well.
Excellent. Well, I think those are three great recommendations. One of the songs I know almost by heart, which is Allie's song. But the other two bands I'm very familiar with, and I don't recall the specific songs, but I think I've seen them play live, and I have to agree with you. They're both a lot of fun in their own ways. We're going to throw those picks, the three specific picks that you've given us on our playlist, our season 3 playlist, which, as I said earlier, will be on Spotify and
Great.
Amazon Music and all that stuff. And we'll try to find some links and some other stuff to some of those bands, and hopefully get some other people to them. Chris and I both came up with our own lists, our own little mini playlist of local bands. Chris, you said you were going from Cincinnati local as opposed to Durham local. Why don't you go through your list?
So I went as far back as the 80s, because I am old too. I'm older than you, John.
I remember
And
the 80s.
yes, and I'm referencing someone you already did. So Adrian Belew at one point joined the band. He's not from Cincinnati, but he joined the band that originally was called the Raisins, which was and ended up being a bad band name because they had those commercials back then where the raisins sang and danced.
Heard it through the grapevine.
So they later changed their name to the Psycho Dots after Adrian went back on solo. But the Bears remade one of the Raisins songs, which is one of my favorites of all time, called Fear is Never Boring. That's from their 1987 album, self-titled The Bears. it's just got some funny lines. It's upbeat. It starts out with Mama's little baby likes fear and torture. Mommy's little baby likes violent sex. She thinks she's Queen Victoria. Get up, ride the Pony Express. So Queen Victoria had a thing for horses, apparently. So, but the rest of the message is, fear, get your blood going, and it's just an upbeat, fun song. I thought that the Bears were really good. Just lasted for a couple albums and continued to listen. But I had seen the Raisins, I think, in a small venue when I was in high school. Didn't to pick Cincinnati is because I remember being tied to bands just because they were from Cincinnati. So I was never in the music scene. You'll never hear me sing. You'll never hear me play an instrument. But I love listening. And my second one, I had to pick them. A lot of choices I could have made, but Afghan Wigs, who
Oh,
had
yeah.
a little. So Greg Doley had a little rise in fame for a while, and I just went with a fairly obvious one, but I went with Debonair from the album Gentleman, 1993. I like them quite a bit, mainly because they're from Cincinnati. Didn't last with me. That I really wanted to focus on, though, and it's an obvious choice for the song itself because it was a nice regional hit, but I chose Little Bastard by the Ass Ponies
Huh.
from the album Electric Rock Music in 1994. I've stayed with, I guess he goes by Chuck Cleaver. He's in Wussy now. One of my favorites of all time. He's got that offbeat humor. Little Bastard is just a weird ass song, and it became popular enough that most folks would have heard it a time or two.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
this is a great album, actually.
yeah,
That
it
whole
really
album
is.
is so
It's
funny.
weird as hell. Like Tom knows, and if you've listened to a couple of our episodes, I don't often pick female artists, and I'm going to. So the band Over the Rhine, for a while, their lead singer, probably mispronounced her name, is Karen Bergquist. She's got a beautiful voice. Most of their stuff is really slow. I remember liking, it's a little bit more, one of the more upbeat songs called I Painted My Name. It's from the 1992 album Patience. I would definitely recommend checking that one out. She's a really good songwriter. It's just most of their stuff is a little too slow even for me. But that song stands out. And then lastly, I went with the very obvious one, but I went with one of their early albums. The National is from the Cincinnati area, and I think it's their debut album. I went with The Theory of the Crows, downbeat, true song about selling your soul to work, the types of jobs that we do. Uh, it's one of my favorite songs too. So I did most of these are songs that I truly like. I tried to tie them together with that pride that you have in local bands, especially when you're in high school. At least it was for me. And the National, I'll listen to anything they make and make sure people know that they're technically from Cincinnati, even though I think they're out of Brooklyn or the Bronx now. But so those are my five.
I didn't realize any of those bands were connected to Cincinnati.
I
It's
had
so
no idea. I had no idea. I was just thinking the same thing myself. I was like, the National is from Cincinnati.
yeah,
The
that's
big one is Ass Ponies and Wussy.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Do you ever get the backlash when your band and the pride you have in your band from your town gets famous? Kind of like the Springsteen effect, like people that were walking around when Born in the USA came out. I was like, oh, that ain't Springsteen anymore. We used to see him at the Pony, and it was like with 35. These people don't know anything about the E Street Band, and that goes away too. But I think there's almost an inevitable immediate backlash if the band that you love, because you're like, I want these guys to go so far, and then you're like, oh, they sold out. It's
I'll tell you, there's at least one episode you haven't listened to because you just described Chris's whole personality.
oh,
If they become popular, he steps back.
I'm out.
Yeah, that's why the National was hard, but I was all into their early, and I don't even really know how famous they are, but they're far more famous than they were when I was buying their first
they're
couple.
big. I would say they're big.
Especially now that two of those guys play with what's her face, Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's funny.
So, what do you have?
It's funny you talk about kind of the pride of place that in listing those Cincinnati bands, and this is definitely my old man pride of place for Joliet. And John and I have definitely overlapped a little bit here. I expected we would. I am really proud of the Joliet music scene. You know, again, I've never played. I'm, as Chris is, I'm a professional appreciator, but I've gone to a lot of live shows. John, you know that. You've seen my face. Maybe not as much after my twins were born, but I still make my efforts. The songs that I recommended do tend to be a little bit older, only because I fell in love with these songs from these artists first. And unfortunately, I don't know as many of the new Joliet area bands or Chicago suburban bands, just because I'm not getting out as much as I used to. But the first one I want to list, and the one I'm really happy to put on our playlist, is by the Stone City Stragglers. You mentioned them a little bit early on. It was a giant band. I don't know, 12 people. Sometimes it felt like 20 people. So many different instruments, and they were, as you said, kind of an Americana alt country, even before, not necessarily before it became big, but certainly before anybody around here, I think, was listening to that kind of music.
Before I was.
Yeah, before you were, and I was just so happy to find the type of music that I was already kind of getting into, and getting to see it live and hear original songs from, I think, you know, I put Brent and you, Brent, is the leader of that band, and now a leader of a different band, or co-leader. I don't want to assign rank to anybody, but he's one of the, just, you and he, I think, are some of the best songwriters I've heard, period. You know, not just local, but in general. I think you both have such a great way with the phrase. He's got that classic country tenor sound. His voice. You and he are also the exception to my general rule, which is I like music by people who don't sing that well. And both,
You've always said that. You've always said that.
And they're really, a lot of those bands that I listen to are, you know, Dylan is a great example to go as far back maybe as you can. But you and Brent both have really beautiful voices when you sing, and but I think it's really brought out by the songwriting. And you know, he's now performed in a bunch of different iterations. Stone City Stragglers, with the exception of a reunion show here or there, I don't think they've played together in at least 10 or 15 years.
Right.
But their song "No Strangers to This Road" from the album "The Last Resort," which came out in 2004, is one of my favorites of theirs. And it just captures not only his singing voice, but Allison, at the time, Allison Maroney, her voice, again, just a beautiful singing voice, as well as just the musicianship. That was a tight band of really good musicians.
So good. You know, so good.
So good. I mean, you would listen to this, you know, listen to the album, you know, the studio album. It's fantastic. If you heard them play it live when they were up and running, man, you could almost not tell the difference. They were so tight. They just hit everything perfectly. And that's the first song on my list. The second, actually, and I was going to cross it off after I heard you talk about Allison, now Allison Flood, formerly Maroney. But I love that album, Blackbird. And my favorite song from that album is Ties That Bind.
Mm-hmm.
Almost an EP, because it's not a whole lot of songs.
Yeah, it's a shorter one.
But it came out in 2015. And I still probably listen to that album all the way through at least once every month or two. And Ties That Bind is just a fantastic song. And she has an absolutely beautiful voice. She's a great person, but man, when she opens her mouth, it's hard to believe it's coming from a person. I swear to God.
Great writer as well. Really, really great writer.
Yeah. And it sounds like she's just getting better and better all the time now that you guys are working together in Crooked Tales. Again, crossing over with you, I was going to take this off my list because you mentioned them, but you kind of mentioned them in general, the band River Horse.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Brian's voice. I'm a big fan of that album, which came out in 2016, which was called On a Windy Tree. And the song I'm recommending for the playlist is To Kill a Sparrow, with the subtitle of And So It Goes. And I think that really captures what you were describing, that kind of ethereal, real mystical feel, which isn't really my thing very often, but they really captured it. And I think that's a great album. And
absolutely.
That song is cool as hell.
Oh man. And like, again, you know, like with Crooked Tales, not to keep talking about that, but it's amazing to in that band to kind of be in the band, like to play electric guitar and you know, in the band and do some backing vocals, but to see those two like in their processes and just the songs that they come up with and the way that, you know, I would have never thought how well their songs would have merged together as if they wrote them simultaneously or were sitting in a room. You know, most of the songs that come to the table, Ali had songs and Brian had songs, and they put them together. And I said, man, it's the theme, even thematically,
Yeah.
they're similar, you know. And you would think of Brian as this more like ethereal rock kind of slow thing, and Ali certainly more of this Americana folk country
Right.
thing. For some reason, when they bash it together, to be able to witness that and be in a room with that is just mind blowing, man.
Well, yeah, one of the things that came to me when you were describing our local scene, the Joliet local scene, and I imagine most local scenes. I imagine this is the way it is in Durham and you know, even in Cincinnati, which I know nothing about. But there's just kind of an egoless approach, an ego-less approach to making music that I'm, you know, a little bit in awe of, and I can watch it from the outside because I know you and I know Allison, and you know, I'm acquainted with Brian, and when I see you guys on the stage, there's just a goal that you guys have, and it doesn't matter really who wrote what or who's singing what verse or who's playing what instrument. It's cool to see, frankly. I love to watch it.
Awesome.
And then my final selection for the playlist for this episode is one of my favorite local artists, probably my favorite local artist. His name is John Condron.
I thought that was off the you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I'm definitely doing it. But again, I'm going way back. I am going back to My Own Device.
Wow.
Which was, I don't know, it certainly wasn't the first album that you were part of because you described, you know, other bands, etc. But I think it was your first solo effort.
It was.
And the song I'm picking is the title song. I love the song My Own Device. Again, I still listen to it, you know, every couple months. I just put on the album, but sometimes just that song. It's on a couple of my own playlists, my workout playlists and stuff like that. So, you know, not to make you blush, and we wouldn't see it behind that giant beard of yours anyway. You know, I do consider you a great songwriter, and I've told you before, the improvement I've seen in how you play guitar from 2002, which is roughly when I met you, to the last time I saw you play, which was about 6 months ago. You've become such a great guitar player.
Oh, thanks.
Both in terms of lead and playing by yourself up on stage, and also when I see you play with other people and how you know, you're in the background sometime because that's what it takes. You know, I listen to all your stuff fairly frequently, but I go back to that album more than you would realize. Actually, it's a great one on it. I'm proud to put it on the playlist.
I have a great story about that song, and I came back from doing that record in New York, and I didn't have a band yet. I had done it with it was one of the guys from Poets and Slaves, like I told earlier.
Yeah.
And then and he also played drums on it. He was a really good drummer. He was just a great musician. But and then he had a friend that played bass. So it was made kind of bandless, but with other players out in New York over the period of, I think, came back. They had opened up 105.5 The Cat in the Rialto building when it was downtown Joliet. They put that radio station in the window there next to the Rialto. And some of the DJs, and Mike Tamano in particular, came in. He said, "Oh," and as I gave him the record, he took it and put it into regular rotation on the station, which was, I just thought was wild. Like, I thought maybe he might play it on a local show or something like that. But it would play, you know, at that time, it would play probably, you know, 12 times a day or 10 times a day on the radio, when people were actually, this is, you know, before streaming, people were actually listening to the different radio stations. And it was really fantastic. Matter of fact, the first date that Jill, my wife, and I ever went on, we went out, and on the way home, on the background, and it comes on the radio.
Oh my God.
And it comes on the radio, and I just kind of like sat there and I was like, oh. You know, and she says, "Hey, is that you?" And I was like, "Oh, is it? Oh yeah. Oh, huh. That's odd." You know, but it was playing on the radio and stuff, and I was like, "Thank you, God."
Yeah, no kidding.
Thing, you know, like, so that song, it's funny that you picked that song, because I very rarely would think about it anymore, like so many years later. And you know, to me, yeah, it was a very, there's a lot of people that I think have been very, very kind to me over the last 25 years in this town. And I think that having that song, and Mike and that radio station kind of play that song regularly, kind of really some footing out here, you know, which was great. I think
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great. It was kind of the single off of that. It wasn't the third song in the album, by the way, Chris. I think it was where did that come in the album? I can't remember off the top of my head. Was
I
it
thought
the
it might
title,
be the
like the
opener.
beginning?
It
Yeah,
might be the opener.
I think it might have been the first one.
It's like very creatively to name the record after a song and then put it first is, you know.
Yeah, no, I think it worked, and I that one is a great one. You've written and performed a lot of really good songs.
Thanks.
But that one always sticks out for me. So we are going to ask you to see if you can play a song for us before we go. I know you've been working on a new album with Crooked Tales. I don't know if I'm going to leave it completely up to you what you want to play. But before we do that, I've got a list of dates here, and they're all coming up after this show will drop. So I'm hoping we can plug a little stuff for you, and hopefully some local people will find out about it and head over to see you play.
Sure.
If I can go through the list, maybe you can just give us a quick update on where it is or what we're dealing with. The first one is on June 25th at the Joliet Public Library.
The fear-inducing show for me, the nerve-wracking show for the children at the library every year.
The children and me and my wife. I don't think I've missed one of your library shows. So
it always winds up being so nice, and the kids are great, and you know it's my Jill works for the Joliet Public Library, so if anything I can do to support them, because it's a the public library. I mean,
absolutely,
it's fantastic. So,
what do you know? What time?
I believe it's usually around 6. I think that's about the time. But there'll be things out to post it or whatever.
The next date I show is June 27th at Chicago Street Pub, which I know is on Chicago Street in Joliet. That says what I have listed here is a 1-in-1 series.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the 1-in-1 series is the mighty Mike Trisna. He comes up with a theme. Not allowed to music or to learn the songs ahead of time. I am allowed to Google the theme and pull top songs from that particular theme, and then I'm allowed to have the words. That's it.
And that's it.
And so it's a 1-on-1 set, because I open up the show by doing a set of originals, and then I come back on it and I do a set of songs I don't know that may or may not work. And it's always kind of a little bit of a high wire act, and it's always fun, just a little bit of fun, on the same kind of.
I'm hoping that Mike Trisna, who you mentioned, who is the proprietor of Chicago Street Pub and kind of one of the people at the center, I think, of the local music scene these days, I'm hoping to have him as a guest someday. I've reached out to him.
Guest.
He would, I mean, he does know a million people, and there's a guy who can tell a story. So that shows. So that's June 27th, which is
having to edit things.
Yeah, that may be true. That's a Thursday. Is that Thursday evening?
It is, yeah, it is. And again, I have no idea what theme he will pick. Sometimes it's last month it was animals, and I was like the animals. He's like, no, like actual animals. And so you go and you Google animal songs, and then you have to correct it because it puts up all the songs from the animals, and you say no, like animal songs, and then you play, you get horse with no name, and that kind of stuff, and so you just give it a shot.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I have not seen any of those shows. I may be down there on June 27th myself, as far as that goes. It looks like you're playing at the Downtown Farmers Market in Joliet on June 29th, which I believe would then be a Saturday. Is that a daytime deal?
It is a morning. I think 10 a.m. It's a new thing that they're doing on Jefferson Street there by where the old courthouse was taken down.
Oh yeah. Oh, cool.
The front of the memorial statue there.
Sure.
And they're trying to get it to go. The people from shop as a Internode, Chicago Street there.
Right.
They're wonderful people, and they're kind of starting it. So yeah, it's I did the first one, and then I'm doing the one at the end of June too. It's nice, just little walk up around, peruse the plants and the offerings there, and I'm on the corner kind of.
That's kind of that's why the way I like to hear you play, actually. Looks like there's a songwriter spotlight also at Chicago Street on June 30th, which would be, I guess, Sunday night.
Afternoon.
Oh, Sunday afternoon. Excuse me.
Yeah, like a 2:00 deal.
Awesome. You're playing with Crooked Tales, or actually Crooked Tales Trio at Dooley Stadium, which is our minor league baseball stadium in Joliet, on August 16th.
That's
Is that
correct.
part of a
Yeah,
bigger show?
it's New Orleans North. It's the New Orleans North
Oh, okay.
Festival, which is a move New Orleans North to the stadium, which I think would be really neat. It'd be like a kind of harken back to memories of Hop String Fest, I think. But
Yep, that was a nice, turned out to be a nice place for a music festival. I'm
yeah,
looking forward to that. That New Orleans North has really developed over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years into a lot of fun, food wise and particularly music wise. Lots of really good bands.
I mentioned the Big Land Yap earlier. They're playing at this thing. I mentioned the Righteous Hillbillies earlier. They're playing at this thing. As long as not a bunch of other bands, Two-Thirds City Brass, and there's a Zydeco band at the end. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, that'll be fun. And I'm pretty sure New Orleans North has their own website. Not sure exactly what the address is, but we'll put some links up on the website to these places we've mentioned, including Chicago Street Pub. The last thing I have listed as a plug for you is the Porch and Park Festival, also in Joliet, on the near west side, August 17th, which is, I know, is a Saturday. That's an all-day deal, and it sounds like you're playing kind of all day.
Well, we have a set on one of the. It's a great thing. I mean, for people that are checking this out that don't know what that is. It's Porch and Park. There's music all day on various full houses porches. All over the certain area, the cathedral area in Joliet. And then at night, it culminates with everybody commencing on this park there on the corner across the street from University of St. Francis, and under the pavilion. And there's a full on, big sound system, into the night show where you bring your chair and you sit there. And so the Old Gang Orchestra, I'll be playing with the Old Gang Orchestra during the day on one of the porches, and then playing with Crooked Tails at night under the pavilion there in the park.
Yeah, this is a kind of a new festival for the Joliet area, but it really has picked up. I went last year and walked around, really enjoyed myself. Music all over the place, and really
So
just
many
kind
bands.
of
We
nice
talked about
vibe.
before the thing too, is that this year for the first time they're going to have a roaming traveling golf cart full of bluegrass musicians. I think for the band Rochambeau. I don't know if you heard them yet, but
No.
and they're literally going to be on a golf cart just
Oh, that's
from
hilarious.
place to place up and down the street. So, which I think sounds great.
That's really funny. That should be a good time. I know Porch and Park Festival has a website as well. Again, we'll put the link on thirdsonginpodcast.com. The only other thing I wanted to mention before I press you into service is you have a Facebook page for Old Gang Orchestra. Sounds like that might be the best place to find
At the moment,
stuff.
that's probably it's John Condron and the Old Gang Orchestra. You can link it off mine too as well. There's a website, but as I was explaining earlier, it's down for a couple of reasons right now. It will be back up eventually, but there's no reason to go to a dead page at the moment. So,
Yeah.
And then anywhere else, the music, you can get the music anywhere. It's I will say this: there's a funny thing that happens with Spotify and Pandora and all the other wherever you find your music these days, Apple Music or whatever, where if you search my name, you'll get the 2 records that just say my name.
Right.
If you search John Condron the Benefit, you'll get the 3 records or the 4 records that just say that. If you search John Condron and the Old Gang Orchestra, you'll get the Last Dead Tree record. And for some reason it won't tie them in, or at least maybe some of them do, but on certain ones it's very specific. So it's a little bit disappointing because I think it would be nice to just be able to send everybody to one place and you can listen to the whole lineage of it or wherever, back from my own device up until what we're doing.
Absolutely.
But so if there is ever any confusion and you're trying to figure out why can't I find that particular one they were talking about, type in the actual band name or however it comes across in their algorithm, and there'll be new ones. You said we're currently in the studio, some tracks on the first Crooked Tails record, and then the Old Gang Orchestra is pre-production for our next one as well too. So
excellent. Well, you're as always, you're musically busy, boy. Every time I talk to you, there's something that is in the pipeline. I'll try to make sure I mention each of the bands by name in the show description on Spotify, and we'll throw as much as we can into as mentioned on the website. So
I'm sure I missed a million of them too, and you as well. And so it's just not long enough a podcast to talk about all the great bands that there are out here and everywhere else too. So.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2. Maybe that's what one of the things we'll talk to Mike about if we can get him on.
Part 2, bands that are mad at us now because we didn't mention them in.
Yes. Yeah, I'm always concerned about that stuff. But I promise a part 2. We do part 2s all the time. So I do think you've pulled out your weapon of choice there, and I would love to hear you play a song. I think the listeners would really appreciate it. So, what would you like to play for us?
I think because it's Sunday morning, and because I'm sitting, and because we had the Beer and Bourbon Festival yesterday, that I'll keep it on the mellow side, if that's all right with you. You talked about some new stuff and some old stuff. I think I'm going to play something that kind of is a little bit of both, because what happened with the Old Gang Orchestra is we put out a record called Dead Tree, and we did the release at the Rialto with River Horse at the time. That's how long ago that's been. And that was 2018, and then everything kind of shut down for a while, and all of our plans got shelved. And then there are things that happened along the way with the band, and all of a sudden it's, what is it, 6 years later, or 6 years later.
Yeah.
And it's shocking, because it was never our intention to kind of go underground after that record. It was really a high point for us. And so there's been a large amount of songs written, and many of them have been played for years, but they're not on any record yet. So this new record will be full of songs that people may think are on the last record, just because kind of subliminally or subconsciously they've been hearing them for since that record was done. So I'm going to play one that kind of straddles the two. It's something that was be on this next entry, but it's been sticking around for a while, and it is a kind of very literal story about it's called Last Line. I don't know if you've ever heard it or not, but during the shutdown, settling into the fact that this was going to be a little bit longer than maybe we thought. The 2-week vacation was not to be. And you woke up in the morning, and I had a cup of coffee, and I went outside, and it snowed. It was April, an April morning, and I just kind of laughed, like you're kidding me, right? Like spring had already started. We were already looking forward to some nice things, and it snowed, and I just remember thinking, like, I don't know, what's more of this I can take, and you just, and I don't know, but I went back inside, and I sat down, and I just kind of, that particular line just kicked off this basically love song, really. At least of perspective song, maybe. How's that? So I'll play it for you. It's called Last Line. Woke on a Wednesday, was snowing in April. Aside from that, nothing had changed. I dressed for resistance, but being consistent, I sat myself down to complain. Gone is the sound, the sound of it all making sense. Don't let me down, 'cause you're my last line of defense. Yeah. Waking aware, I've been drinking my share, and maybe a little bit more. I'm climbing up scaffolds, connected to nothing, see the new truths defining before. Gone is the sound of it all making sense. Don't let me down, 'cause you're my last line of defense. You're my last line of defense. I woke on a Wednesday, it was snowing in April. Aside from that, nothing had changed. I dressed for resistance, but being consistent, I sat myself down to complain. Gone is the sound of it all making sense. Don't let me down, 'cause you're my last line of defense. You're my last line of defense. Woke on a Wednesday, it was snowing in April.
Wow. That sounded great, man. I hope it records well because
The fingers are a little foggy this morning.
a little Sunday morning fingers going on.
Yeah, right. Sunday morning fingers.
Dude, man, that's a beautiful song. I did hear you play that
Oh, thanks, Tom.
somewhere because I remember the story behind it. I'd forgotten how beautiful the song was. I think I might have been a couple beers in at that point, so I might not have given it the attention it deserves. But it amazes me that I know people that can do what you just did. It's thank you so much for being on this episode. I think that we don't have a huge audience, but I think the ones who listen are really going to appreciate it. We would like one more time to thank John Condron for being our special guest this episode. You can find links to everything John Condron on our As Mentioned page at thirdsonginpodcast.com. As usual, we're asking you to follow us and rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Give us all your stars. Please follow, share, review, rate our playlists, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and YouTube Music. You can also find us on Facebook at Third Song In. You have been listening to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. Thanks for listening. You can find links to John Condron's fuck you. God damn it.